Hi there. In this tutorial, we will start creating user forms using the Form Designer tool. We will take a look at the design elements of Form Designer and configure different components and data sections in our user form, which can then be rendered directly in the platform. This requires that your application has a data model already configured. If you don't have a data model available, you can create one by following along with the previous tutorial. Or if you prefer, you can use a configuration bundle to upload the data model directly into your app. For more information on how to use configuration bundles, check out the link in the description below. In your IS Tools application, open the main menu and navigate to Form Designer. The Form Designer utilizes the grid structure with different panels that can be moved around and adjusted freely. Feel free to take a few minutes to familiarize yourself with the different panels and find a layout that works for your screen space. Now that we're familiar with the Form Designer UI, let's get started creating our first form. The canvas is the main panel and is used as a what you see is what you get editor, or WYSIWYG for short. This means that in order to populate our form with content, all we need to do is drag components from the component tray panel onto our canvas. But first things first. The Properties panel lets us quickly configure individual components, or in this case, the form properties. Just make sure the form root component is selected in the canvas first. The Caption property for the form root lets us define a name for the form. We'll also provide some dimensions for our canvas grid. It's recommended that you use the same screen ratio as that which the form will be rendered in. We'll use a 16:9 ratio and set the dimensions to 1280 by 720 pixels. We can now see red lines on the canvas indicating the usable area of the form that will be rendered. Okay, let's start adding some components to our form. Drag a table from the blue components onto the canvas. The table component is often referred to as a data section. Data sections are the primary components used to display multiple data fields from table records. There are 4 types of data sections in IS Tools: the table section, the detail section, the multi-detail, and the repeater. The table is the most straightforward. It displays data as rows and columns, with the rows representing individual records and the columns the available fields. Let's select a data source for our table section. We can select any of the record tables in our data model. We're going to choose User. Now we can add some fields to our section. We can see all the available fields in the Field panel. We could display all the fields, but that would likely make for a poor user experience. A better approach is to consider what user group will be using the form and what information is the most relevant to them. If we need to see a large quantity of fields for a specific record, the Detail section provides a better view for the user. Once again, we'll select the user record table as our data source. Since the Detailed section only displays fields from a single record, we also need to specify what record to display. We can do this with the Limited By and Limitation Field properties. In this case, we'll use our table section as our limiting component, and the active record will be our limitation field. This means that our Detail section will display fields for the record that we select in the table section. We'll drag and drop all the relevant fields into our section. We can specify the size of the canvas snap grid using the Grid Size tool in the toolbar. In order to display the user's avatar, we can use a media component. Just drag the component into the Detail section, then select Avatar in the File field property. Select Full Image Cover to crop the image to fit the media component without stretching it. We can use the border properties to give the avatar a better look. By setting the border radius to half of the width and height, we can change the appearance of our media component to a circle. We'll toggle the read-only property for the username fields, as this data should be fetched from the user account and should not be mutable by the user. We'll toggle it for accumulated work hours as well. Let's try rendering our form. We'll provide a name for our user form before saving our progress. Now just hit the Open Form icon in the toolbar. Ta-da! We have a user form. We can see that our details section appears empty. This is because it's limited by the selected record in the table section. But as soon as we select a record in our table, the detail will be populated with the fields from that record. Things look all right so far. However, it appears as though the sections in our rendered form are not scaling with the screen area. Let's head back to Form Designer to make our form more responsive. Under the Layout area in our section's properties, we'll change the Fixed Edges properties to Scale. This will scale the component both vertically and horizontally according to the user's screen dimensions. Let's do the same thing for our Detail section. We'll save our changes and render the form again. That looks better. But the fields in our Detail section are not scaling with the detail component itself. From back in Form Designer, we can use the Select Rectangle tool in the toolbar to select all of our components' fields at once. This lets us set the Fixed Edges property for all the highlighted fields in one go. We'll also need to increase the border radius of the media component, since the component is now larger in our rendered form. Hit Save and render the form once more. Okay, so now our form scales well with the screen. However, the fields in the detail section are needlessly long. Let's change it to a static size and instead have our table section cover the rest of the screen. This time, we'll set the horizontal edges to both and the vertical to top for the table section, and then set the fixed edges to right and top for the detail section. Now, when we render the form, we can see the detail section allocates a fixed amount of space on the screen, and the table section stretches horizontally in response to the screen width. Wonderful. With the Style properties, we can customize the look and feel of the components in our form. Not only does this help us create a user interface that projects the visual styling of our brand, but it can also be used to improve user efficiency through the likes of color coding and highlighting. Have a go at styling the table to your liking. Keep in mind that changing the colors can impede visibility if the contrast between text and background is insufficient. The third data section type is the multi-detail. The multi-detail is similar to the detailed section, but it also provides the ability to switch the section between records. The section also only displays data from one record at a time, but here we're not required to limit the section by another one. Go ahead and select your work log table as our data source. If you followed along with the previous tutorial, you may remember that work log records are child records of the user. This means that we can easily limit the records available in the multi-detail to work logs that have a relation to the user record that is active in the detail section. All we need to do is select the detail section as our limited by property value and select user as the limitation field. Easy peasy. Additionally, we can set more parameters to limit what records will be shown in the multi-detail with the filter property. Let's create a filter so that we only display work logs from the past 30 days. The first dropdown contains all the available fields that the filter will be based on. We could use any date or date time field for our filter. How about start? From the second dropdown, we'll select an operator. We want to display records that have a start time up until today. So we'll use greater than or equal to today. But hang on, Brian. If we're only showing records with the start value of greater than today, won't we only be showing future records? Yes, that would be true, were it not for the fact that we're now going to modify the operator value third dropdown. We're going to enter negative 30 days. There are many ways in which filters can be applied, and we'll cover filtering in more depth in a future video, but for now, there's plenty of information in the ISTools documentation. Okay, so now our multi-detail will only show records that have a relation to the active user record in the detail section, and where the value of the start field is greater than or equal to today's date minus 30 days. Let's add some fields to the multi-detail section. Presumably there will mostly be one work log per workday. So we'll use the record created time meta field to identify the work log record. Check the hide time property so that the form user only sees the date when the work log was created. The fields marked with an asterisk are meta fields. These fields exist by default for any records in any table and become very useful when data history is involved. Both start and end are date time fields, but the user will only really be interested in the time here, so we can use the date format property to show only the hours, minutes, and seconds. You can find information on the date formatting in the documentation. Hit save and render the form. Select a user from the table. We haven't actually created any work log records yet, so let's do that now. Just fill in the relevant fields, hit save, and then use the plus icon to add another record. Once you have multiple records, we can use the arrow keys to navigate between them. You may have noticed that record created time displays the current date for all of the records we made. Most meta fields are not mutable by the user. In a real-world scenario, this form would not be used to create work log records. More likely, it would be used by administrators to monitor user records and correct discrepancies in their data. In the next tutorial, we will create another user form where users can view their personal data, utilize a calendar, and use a digital timestamp to create work logs. In the Properties menu for the multi-detail, we can toggle which buttons will be available in the icon tray. Let's get rid of everything but the Add and Save icons. With sorting, we can choose which field will determine the order that the records are displayed in. We'll set it to Start and toggle reverse order so that we get the most recent work log records first. The last data section type is the repeater component. It's used to render data from multiple records in rows and columns. Unlike the table section, which utilizes a cell to display data, the repeater renders multiples of an entirely customizable area, not unlike the detail component, that can be structured into both rows and columns. This makes the repeater the most versatile data section type, as it can be configured to display data in a multitude of variations. Before dragging a repeater to the canvas, we're going to add another component. Grab a panel from the component tray and place it underneath the table section. The panel is another commonly used component, most notably used to divide the form into different sections. It's fundamental in configuring forms with different tabs and pages. We'll get into this in more detail in a future video. We'll set the fixed edges properties of our panel to stretch so that it will expand towards our other component in both directions. If you want, you can set the style properties to your liking as well. Next, grab a repeater and drag it onto the panel. Note that the parent property of the repeater is now the panel and not the form root. This means that it will inherit certain properties from the panel. Select the company record table as the data source for the repeater. In the custom section in the properties panel, we can configure the layout of the data records in the component. We're going to leave the number of columns as 1. We'll also increase the gap between the records to 12 pixels. We'll set fixed edges to scale Note that the fixed edges are now relative to the panel component and not the entire screen. Next, we'll add some fields and a media component to our appear. And do some optional styling. For the media component, we will select the logo file field and check full image cover. Now we'll set the horizontal fixed edges of our fields according to their relative position in the repeater. The media component will be left. The name and bio will be both. And the contact field's right. Go ahead and hit save and render. And there we have it, our first user form. The next tutorial will take a look at some more advanced functions of Form Designer, where we'll be using IQL, IceTools' custom coding language, to set parameters that alter the behavior of our form. Then, also using IQL, we will start creating a few rules in Rules Manager, which lets us manipulate data globally across our application. Thank you for watching, and feel free to reach out to IceTools support with any questions or feedback. IceTools, digital empowerment for your workforce.